I'm 60 years old, just turned, by the way, and I avoid people now, if I'm honest with you. And it's not because I'm bitter, it's really because I had decades of being a people pleaser, decades of being agreeable, decades of being the go-to person. And I woke up and I realized I'm not even sure if that's who I am anymore.
And the same thing happened to me 8 years ago when I turned 60. And if you've spent your entire life pleasing everyone around you, this might be the wake-up call that you need right now.
You know, back in my career days, I sat on a panel in New York City at the Marriott in Times Square. I think there was, 5,000 people there. And on the panel, they asked, what is your greatest fear? And honestly, at that moment, and I carried that moment through probably decades after that presentation, my biggest fear was, did I have enough stamina for everybody, everything, and every job, every action in my life, every day, every year? And I was exhausted.
Well, it's funny. That reminds me of another story you tell, and you might have told it on that panel when you talk about juggling the balls. And you have glass balls and you have rubber balls. And the glass balls represented your 3 daughters. They represented, did I have a glass ball?
You did.
Represented me, our dog, our life, our family. Because if one of those balls fell and you weren't able to be there when you needed to be there because worried about people pleasing and making sure we're okay, the rubber balls, if they fell, they bounced.
Right.
They were fine. And I love when you told that story. And it, in retirement, it's not the same. I don't feel like we have glass balls.
Well,
right?
It's interesting. I woke up one day and, Mark and I are big journalers and, we're doing some mindful work. And I started a page off with just, 3 words, like, who am I? And it's an interesting realization when you were the go-to people pleaser, solution provider, team leader, manager, executive. You were all those things. And you wrap them up nicely each day, each week, each year. And now it's like, who am I? And what I started to realize, very interestingly, was, I'm no longer the go-to person for my 3 daughters. They have loves in their lives. My one daughter's engaged, the other 2 are in very committed relationships. And when they talk about the people they go to, it's their new significant other. And that switch, while it was, from a mom's perspective, a little unsettling, it was also quite freeing because I'm no longer their person, right? I could do my own thing now.
And when I married Jody and we got together, she had 3 young daughters. And Jody made it very clear to me that those 3 people are her number 1. And I was number 4. But what's happened now? This is exciting news for us to share.
So exciting news for Mark is I just got back from a trip with my 3 daughters and I was explaining this feeling and, how it's unsettling, but it's also freeing and, it's peaceful. And now I need to figure out who I am and who's my new number 1.
That's me. I'm now Jody's number 1. That should be the name of this video.
Number 1.
But that's not the name.
No.
I'm 60 now and I avoid people. So let's talk about how the common trap that people get stuck in. And really, it's during your career. You've got such a huge team of people. And if you have children, you're balancing that and aging parents and all of that. And we spend our whole life like supporting these relationships. And that is just something that you need to find a way. We'll talk about a new perspective in a minute. But that's how we get trapped because we think we need to keep doing that forever.
Well, and I also think I went through life thinking that being available, being the go-to, being the solution provider, I always thought that meant I was a really nice and good person.
Right.
Like I thought that was like a checkbox that you had to do. But really, over the years, you can become resentful or curmudgeoned or, kind of the cranky old person because you don't want to, have all that responsibility anymore. It's an interesting dynamic.
It is. And when we stepped away from our career, we talk about this in other videos, we stepped away from a lot of relationships. So a new perspective to think about is when you start to let go of these people, sure, your world gets smaller, but your relationships go deeper, and you get to spend different time with quality people that really matter. I mean, if we look at our Facebook contacts or our LinkedIn, but let's go LinkedIn contacts. I think I have 1,500 people. When I was in my career, they all meant something to me. And some of them still do.
Of course.
But many of them don't. You know,
Yeah.
they've moved on, I've moved on. So while our world gets smaller, I love that our relationships get deeper. Is there another perspective?
I also think that, especially maybe for women, you know, just because you find you're in a place in your life where you're choosing yourself, doesn't mean you're abandoning everybody else. Right? So it's like choosing yourself is not, you know, mutually exclusive to, you know, being there when someone needs you or help or a friend or, you know, certainly you or any of the kids. So you have to make the switch in your head that, you know, it's not like it's one or the other.
And I also think that another perspective to think about is you want to start hanging out with people who see you who you are. You know, when I was CEO of my company and you were the senior vice president of your branch, you had 300 people and I had 80 people. They saw me as the boss. I love now that our friends see us as who we are.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's been good. All right, so let's jump into what's the first thing that we want to talk about today to help you step away from some of these relationships and stop being such a people pleaser?
Yeah, you know, these are actionable items that, you know, I encourage you to think about, maybe pick a couple and, you know, figure out if you can incorporate them in your life. But the first one I would say is, you know, stop prioritizing everyone else's needs. You know, I used to feel responsible for literally everyone else's happiness, everyone else's well-being, everyone else's food or health or, you know, mindset, friendships. You know, you're a mom, you're like trying to orchestrate everything for everybody. And I think retirement's a really good time to sit back and look at your own priorities.
Right.
And I know the first time I did that list, the majority of the priorities I listed were still for other people.
Right.
And I had to go back and kind of course correct myself and say, no, but what are my priorities? So I think filling your calendar with your priorities and maybe even just starting, you know, maybe it's not every day it's all about you, but maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday you do something for yourself. Or Tuesday and Thursday you do something for yourself and you still incorporate the others because it's important to, you know, still be in the lives of everyone else.
Well, the second thing that comes to mind for us is that we felt like this people pleasing was costing us our lives. And when I say that, I mean that we were doing it for validation. We were doing it for accolades. We weren't really doing it for joy. I mean, we get, you know, getting joy out of validation is okay, but what really turns us on now about relationships? And for us, it's really deep conversations, having our children call us up and say, I need to share something with you. Good or bad.
Right.
It's better when it's good.
Yeah.
And one of our daughters just called last night to say that she just had a review a month ago and it went really well and she was really happy. And then her boss came back to her last night and said, you know what, we were thinking about what we did for you and we don't feel it's enough. We want to do more.
Yeah,
I mean,
she
the
was
joy,
so excited.
But because of our relationship with our kids and the going deeper with them, that's joy. I mean, that really makes a difference. It's not about the money. It's just that your kids are happy and they love you and they want to share that with you.
You know, the next thing you can do is really start listening to your inner voice. You know, so much of my life, I listened to the noise around me and kind of just squashed the inner voice, unless it was an instinct about somebody or about a product or about a job or about a client or about a circumstance, you know, then I would like pause. But in retirement, you can really use silence to kind of cancel out the noise and listen to your inner voice.
Or listen to Ruby.
Or listen to Ruby bark at the neighbors.
Yep.
It's okay, girl.
The other thing that we started to do is let go of relationships that were too one-sided, where they were friends of ours because they're takers. They're not givers. And what does that mean to me? So someone that calls you up when they need something all the time, but they're not really giving you anything. So I'm trying to think of examples of that. So someone who isn't really calling you up to see how you're doing, how are you feeling? Asking a lot of questions like that. They're concerned. They might have seen a post on Facebook, or they heard through a friend that maybe you weren't doing that well. Those are the kind of friends that you need now. The ones that are one-sided when it's about them and they want to be with you because they're always taking from you, those are the relationships that we don't want anymore.
Right. No, I would totally agree. What comes to mind for me is that question piece, really.
Like
When someone, when you're out to dinner with someone and you've asked them an exhausted list of questions about them and their kids and their job and their schedule and their home and their pets, and you kind of go through the gamut, and you realize at the end of the night they never asked you one question.
Right.
It was just never a two-way street. It doesn't always have to be, but
right.
It's nice when it is.
Well, speaking of questions,
yeah.
Here's a question for you, and please leave it in the comments below. We read every single comment. What is something that we're talking about today, or something else in your life, that you've let go of that's made you feel lighter? So leave that in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
The next thing I did was, I spent some time rebuilding my week, my calendar around myself, around things that were important to me, around things that hit my priority list, about things I wanted to try, challenge or stretch myself. And that really started to focus not only my mindset, but my activities around prioritizing me.
It just made me think of the fact we talk a lot on our videos about scheduling and setting a schedule for the day, the week, the month. And a lot of people say, you overschedule, it's ridiculous. Well, here's the thing. Our time is our most valuable asset.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not the money, it is relationships, but it's also the time. Because TikTok, it just goes away. So we want to make sure we're spending the kind of time that really is important to us individually first. And that means going to the gym. That means having coffee together. That means going out to dinner with who we want to go out with, not just go out because someone called us and it's the in group and you want to hang out with them. No. Our time is the most precious commodity that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing is to really think about the word connection, and then really think about the connections you have. And are they real or are they routine? Are they situational? And I know I felt that way a lot at work. I had so many connections, and it really hit me in the head a week after I retired when no one called me that they were situational connections. So really taking a look at who are your connections where you have honest, meaningful, deep, fun, joyful conversations that stretch you and help you grow.
Yeah. So a lot of these ideas we get from journaling. So down below is our free journaling guide. Don't forget to click that link and download your copy of that guide today. I think it'll really help you start to think a little bit more about your life and who you want to hang out with.
The next thing is I'd like you guys to really think about boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls. And I remember I read a book about boundaries. I did a workbook on boundaries. I had a women's group around boundaries because I know for me that was always something very hard for me to institute because I pictured them as walls. Mm-hmm. And in this workshop, they talked about boundaries actually being doors. Boundaries are actually opening doors and closing doors, right? Closing doors on bad energy that's coming at you and opening doors to better energy that can serve you. Protecting what you're building inside. You have to put down effective boundaries.
One of the things my brother used to say all the time, the word no is a full sentence. And being able to say no to people about an invite or something like that, that takes a lot of courage, and it's a big change. And that's something we all have to get better at, like by not opening that door.
Right, exactly.
Another reason why we are spending less time with a lot of people is that we're making ourselves the main characters in our life, individually and together. And that's a big switch for us. When we were, again, you go back to your career and you've got all these hundreds of people that every day, during the day, someone else is the main character in our life. And we're focused on them, and we focus on them, and we focus on them. Now we focus on ourselves. And I think that's allowed us to grow individually and to grow as a couple and to put other people second. Or in our case, put me first.
Yeah.
because I'm now number one in your life, right?
I think the whole thing is choosing yourself is not selfish. You know, it's really necessary at some stage in your life. And if you haven't had that opportunity because of children, relationships, work, careers, you know, family issues, and you have that chance now, do it and don't be afraid of it.
So today it was, 8 reasons why we are spending less time with people. And hopefully you got a lot out of this. This next video, once you turn 60, your best support system is not your family, but these 5 pillars. So watch this video next.